Welcome to Moments with Mary Ann. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Kacey Ruegsegger Johnson. And she's here today to share with us her new book, Over My Shoulder, a Columbine survivor's story of resilience, hope, and a life reclaimed. Is it possible to have hope after a life-altering tragedy? Now, Kacey is a survivor of the 1999 Columbine High School shooting. She's a wife, a mother of four, a national speaker for bone and tissue donation, and an inspirational speaker. So let's welcome to the show, Kacey Ruegsegger Johnson.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your story. My goodness, I was reading your book and it's ripping my heart, but there are times it's so also healing. I'm so glad you wrote this book.
Wow. Thank you. I know people told me for many years that I should write a book, and I just think it had to happen when it happened. It couldn't have come any sooner than it did, and it seems like it all came together at just the right time.
Well, especially now where, everyone's going through a time of such huge stress. I think your story is so important. So why don't we start with your life before you went to Columbine High School?
Okay. I was raised in Colorado with my parents and three siblings. A really shy girl growing up, just very timid and unsure of my surroundings and myself, and really just a tight-knit family. And that's kind of where I felt safe growing up. And I was a gymnast and a competitor on horseback. That's really where my passion was traveling to compete nationwide on my quarter horses. And my parents got me into riding horses to help build my confidence, to just build that relationship with the horse and the ability to ride and be strong. And that really did work. It built my confidence quite a bit in the competition ring and at the barn. Really just a great childhood. I don't have anything bad to say about my upbringing. It was wonderful. Things got really hard for me, I guess, when I was 15. I was a sophomore in high school and just kind of got in with a group of friends that I maybe wouldn't normally choose to hang out with, and maybe some people who didn't make the best kind of choices that I'd grown up making. Never got into real big trouble, but one day I came home to a message that something was wrong with one of my best friends. So I called his house, and his brother told me that he had hung himself that morning. And really, that was the first moment. I was 15, a couple weeks away from my 16th birthday, and it was my first difficult experience in life. And I really pretty much fell apart. I just had no idea how to handle such a loss and the emotions that came with it, the confusion and the anger, the sadness. As a 15-year-old, you're not supposed to be losing your friends. And that was a really hard thing. So my parents were kind of scrambling, trying to figure out how to handle my reaction to his death, how to support me without being overbearing on me, because I still wanted my teenage freedom that all teenagers kind of want. And then a month later, my friend's best guy friend did the same thing. So within a month, two boys had committed suicide. And I just fell into this deep pit of darkness. And so did the friends around me. We just had no healthy mechanisms for dealing with these losses. And we kind of confided in each other in unhealthy ways and encouraged the sadness and encouraged the anger in each other, because we didn't know what else or how else to give anything but that. And in our isolation as a group, we really pushed away our parents and the people who were trying to fight for us and trying to help us through it. So then after a couple weeks of that, I quit eating. I was constantly listening to sad music, and I was really angry with everybody, my parents, my family, God, friends. And I came to a spot where I just thought the boys who took their lives were the lucky ones, and they weren't having to experience this pain. So I planned my own suicide for an upcoming Sunday. And somehow my parents caught word of this, and they orchestrated this grand rescue that I wanted no part of. But now looking back, I can say they absolutely saved me. I mean, they acted like parents, and they fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. And they kept me from that group of friends. They kept me out of school. I wasn't allowed to lock doors in the house, and they really acted like parents and took control of me when I was out of control. And that really helped me to find my feet on the ground again and kind of start taking some healthier steps into the grief process after those losses.
Oh my gosh, that is so tough. And you hear often when young people get, they have a friend that commits suicide, there seems to be kind of like this ripple effect that happens, and other friends feel like it's the only way out. And, being at that place where you were, in this really dark place, how did your parents, how did they react to all this? How was all that going on?
I mean, I guess if I'm going to try and speak for them, I would say that they were trying to dance the line of intervention versus not. They, they wanted to give me my space, and really the space that I was demanding, whether that was what was best for me or not, that's what I thought I wanted and needed. And they didn't ever want to push me over the edge. So it felt like a really, narrow line for them to be walking. And finally, when it just got to the point that I was just so sick and just not really functioning at all, they knew they had to do something. And they had been talking with counselors, and one of the counselors told them those words, act like parents. And that was the day that they took me out of school. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. Literally, I was sleeping in their room. They wouldn't let me out of their sight until I could pull it together a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds like they really did a great job and did the best they could with that situation. And it sounds like you kind of were doing the same thing. I mean, as a young person, unless you're reaching out and asking for help, it's really tough to know how to get assistance with all these feelings.
Right. I don't think, like I said, you're not supposed to be losing your friends when you're that age. And to lose them to suicide is just a whole nother thing. I mean, the guilt can come into play where, did he ever say something to me? Like, I should have known this. I could have done something. That's a difficult thing to work through. And just not knowing what is normal. How should I feel? How should I react? What does grief look like when you've never dealt with grief before? I mean, not in that way. Every child has had little difficulties and hardships, but nothing like losing a friend to suicide. That was just a new thing for me all over to deal with such a grief.
Do you feel that this part of your story also helps young people who maybe don't know how to deal with their own grief, and parents how to maybe look for signs and address grief?
Definitely. I think, now so many years past it, we've talked with parents, and I mentor other kids who are in difficult spots and having trouble with suicidal thoughts and wondering, how to work through difficulties that young kids just aren't equipped to handle. And now I can give them the perspective of, oh my goodness, my parents absolutely saved my life. And I'm so thankful for their intervention. While in the midst of it, I really just didn't like them for it at all. But now I look back and I thought they were loving me with the deepest kind of real love. Like when they will just put it all on the line to pull me back to them, to keep me safe. But also for kids, when I'm talking with them, and I think I have the perspective of, yes, it was horrible when I was in it, but living through it has been so beautiful. And what that's brought into my life, just an appreciation for life and an appreciation for other people who go through hard things, even if they're different things. There's so much to survive for, really.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I mean, it's interesting that we're having this discussion now. I mean, this time in history, especially in American history, there's so much stress going on. And I think people can really take a lot of positive away from your message in your life because you really have gone through some really just horrific times and been able to come out the other side.
I mean, I hope it's encouraging for that's definitely why I love to share my story with that goal that other people can look inside their own pain and they can find purpose in it and turn it around from just surviving to actually thriving in life, which, I mean, that's the only way to really live and get good life out of your years is to really thrive and not just simply be fighting to survive.
Well, and your book, you talk about being a survivor of the Columbine High School shooting that happened in Colorado in 1999. When did you get to Columbine? When did that happen?
So the year that the boys died was my sophomore year, and it was at the end of the year. It was in the springtime. And that summer, a third boy in our group passed away. Unexpectedly, he had been battling leukemia, but something went wrong and he died pretty suddenly. And it was when he passed away that I realized I just needed a new start. I just needed to start over somewhere else. So my best friend from the barn went to Columbine. So I decided to go transfer to Columbine. So for my junior year, I transferred over to Columbine. And really my focus at that time was getting the world championship show on my horse. So I didn't spend a lot of time at the football games or the basketball games or any of the extracurricular things with the school. So I kind of went to school and did my thing and then was at the barn training. But through that year, I mean, I felt like I had a great year. I shared a locker with my best friend. We went home to my parents' house for lunch every day. My mom would have sandwiches and cookies waiting for us. And then 2 weeks before Columbine happened, one of my horse trainers passed away. And I think it was just this full year of death, and being at Columbine just in a new setting really gave me a new perspective that I didn't have at the previous school when all the suicides started. And I really dealt with her death a lot better than I did with the first two. And I had a horse show coming up 2 weeks after her death, just before Columbine. And I was really motivated to get to that horse show and do really well in her honor. And so that ended 2 days before Columbine happened.
So what do you remember from the day of the shooting?
Everything. I mean, wow. It's interesting. In the FBI interviews afterward, I could recall every moment and almost exactly to the minute of how long I was in there and how long till I got help. And I remember them saying that when you go through such a trauma, there's kind of two responses. You either remember everything, but most often your actual sense of time is way off. Things could have happened way faster than you're remembering or way shorter than you're remembering. But they seemed so surprised at how much I could recall and how accurate it was.
Well, why don't you take us through that day a little bit so our listeners can understand what your story is like? Because sure. With everything that we're going through now, I think people, they may relate, just even from maybe an emotional stress level on what your day was like, what you've been going through. And I think it could be helpful for some people.
Sure. I don't mind at all. The day really started normal. It was a Tuesday morning. We lived maybe 10 or 12 minutes from the school. And as I was heading out to drive to the campus, something told me to stop and tell my mom that I loved her. So I was stepping into the garage and I just had this feeling, go back and tell mom you love her, which isn't normal, I guess. I mean, mom and I love each other, obviously, but to make sure I stopped and tell her I love her before going to school was unusual. So I turned around and hollered up the hall, love you, Mom. And she yelled back, love you, Case. And the rest of the morning was totally normal until lunchtime came. I went to meet Lindsay, that's my best friend, at our shared locker where we would go home to my parents' house for lunch. and she wasn't there. So I started wandering the school to find her. I went to her math class and up another hall looking for her and never found her. Well, by the time I'd been walking in front of the library, which is how I would get out to my car, I realized I no longer had time to make it home for lunch. So for the only time that year, I walked into the library, went to the back window, grabbed a gossip magazine, and sat down just to kill some time. A few minutes later, some noises started happening outside. So a few of us looked out the window to see what was going on, and I didn't notice anything. So I went back to reading my magazine. And then another minute or two after that is when the teacher came running in. She had been outside, and she was screaming at us to get our heads under the tables and hide because there were boys outside with guns. And I looked up, and complete disbelief. I mean, it really took a couple seconds to register that this was happening, but the pure panic in her voice made it so real that this was actually happening. So all I kept hearing her say was, "Get your heads under the tables, get down, hide, heads down." And as she's yelling, the shots from the guns are getting louder, and it's very real. So I ran about 10 feet in front of where I'd been sitting. There was a long table that was sectioned off into little cubicles that would have computers on top. So I found a little space under there and pulled a chair in next to me. And I remember thinking, they're never going to see me here. This chair, it was such a small spot, and the chair was totally protecting me. And then another boy was wandering around not knowing where to go. So I told him to get down and hide in the spot kind of next to mine. And he didn't have a chair to pull in next to him. And I just started praying. I just said, "God, help us." Over and over, "God, help us. God, help us." And the noises got louder. And as the shooters walked into the library, it was like this something rolled across the floor and punched me in the stomach is what it felt like. And it was so sickening in the midst of all the terror that I was already feeling. This gut punch of, I call it evil, hit me. And it was just so overwhelming. And I just kept praying. And they say that when you're facing death, you can see flashbacks of your life. And that's literally what happened for me. It was like a slideshow of my life was going off. I saw pictures of me and my family in Mexico, of me and my sister at the barn, of my little brother playing hockey. And I was still praying as all this was happening. And then I felt a hand laid on my left shoulder, on my back. And I thought to myself, nobody fits under here with me. Who is that? So I turned around to look, and nobody was there. But with the hand that I still felt came this complete feeling of peace. It didn't remove all the terror, but that sick feeling in my stomach was no longer there, and I knew I was about to be shot. I didn't know if I was going to live or die, and I felt okay with whatever that outcome was going to be. And I really kind of waited my turn. And shortly after that, I turned around behind me just to look over my other shoulder, and there was a shooter knelt down, pointing the gun at that boy who hid in the spot behind me. And I knew he was going to kill him. So I turned around and plugged my ears because he was so close, and I knew I would be next. And I remember the shot that killed the boy behind me, and then I remember hearing the shot that hit me. And as it hit me in the back of my right shoulder, it kind of threw me forward and knocked the wind out of my lungs. And whatever noise that was of the wind coming out of my lungs, the shooter yelled at me to quit my bitching. And it was then I realized that he needed to know his work on me was done, or he was going to shoot me again. So I closed my eyes and quit breathing, hoping that he'd move on, and he did. And once he got to the other section of the library, I was listening to everything with my ears. I realized I could open my eyes and look at what had happened. And I had about a 4-inch hole in the back of my right shoulder. And because I'd been plugging my ears, when the slug from the shotgun came out the front of my shoulder, it went through my hand and then straight across my neck. And I couldn't move my arm at all. It was just hanging there. So I tried to stop the bleeding in my hand, and my neck was swelling. It was getting hard to breathe when the two shooters went down to the cafeteria. And I guess when they left the library is when some of the other kids in the library started to say, we need to get out. So they started getting up and running to go out the back door of the library. But I couldn't move that chair from beside me. I realized I couldn't move my arm at all, and I couldn't get myself up. So a boy running by, I was yelling, help me. And he stopped, pulled the chair out, pulled me up to my feet. And we ran out together until we got right outside the building and we got knocked off of each other. And I was left to run alone, holding my right arm to my side. And we were stopped behind another police car for a while. And the boys were taking their shirts off to put on the wounds of the injured to try and stop the bleeding. And another police car came to pick up two injured people, and I was one of them. So he took us back behind another shed, made us get out again. And then another police car came to pick us up and finally took us down to a triage area. And it was in that area where an off-duty nurse came to my side, and I asked her, are they going to cut off my arm? And she couldn't tell me no. She just said, you'll be going straight into surgery. And right after meeting her, a man came up to me with his cell phone and said, who can I call? So I had him call my mom, who I knew would be at home waiting for Lindsay and me. And he said, do you want to talk to her? And I said, no, because I felt so badly that she was going to be hearing what happened to me. And for some crazy reason, I was still really calm, despite the fact that I was losing blood very fast. I was in critical condition. Well, he got on the phone with my mom and said that I could not talk with her, not that I would not. And when you're the mom on the other end, those are two very different meanings. He also told her I looked like I'd been hit by a grenade. So in my mom's mind, things were looking worse than they already actually were. And an ambulance picked me up a few minutes after that. And as my parents drove into the neighborhood, my ambulance passed them on its way out. And I remember the ambulance ride all the way to the hospital. We called my mom again from the ambulance. My parents went and picked up my sister and brother from school to come to the hospital to say goodbye, really. At that point, they didn't know that I was going to make it at that point. And my other brother was off at college. And I remember the first time I actually cried is when my dad walked into the ER. And I felt so badly for my parents having to see me like that. And I asked him, Daddy, did you see the hole? And he said, yes. And that was the first time that I cried.
Oh my goodness, Kacey. I mean, that is absolutely so heartbreaking to hear that. Thank you for taking the time to share that with us. I think your story will offer a lot of hope and encouragement as people go through their own struggles and heartache and tragedy in their life. Okay, so on that note, we are going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Kacey Ruegsegger Johnson in regards to her story in her new book, Over My Shoulder, a Columbine survivor's story of resilience, hope, and a life reclaimed. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Mary Ann. We're here today with special guest, Kacey Ruegsegger Johnson, and she's sharing with us her new book, Over My Shoulder, a Columbine survivor's story of resilience, hope, and a life reclaimed. Before we left for break, Kacey was sharing with us her life story and the horrific accounts of being shot at Columbine High School. Now, Kacey, I know that you share how you, of course, developed PTSD from this event. How did you get to a point of recovery and healing, just mentally and physically, from all of this?
I like to say that the mental and emotional healing was more difficult than the physical healing, which was already horrible in itself. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks and was facing a potential amputation of my right arm. And so doctors spent days trying to figure out how they were going to keep me from being a 17-year-old amputee. And just as a quick side note, they ended up using a cadaver bone from somebody who died in a car accident to save my arm. So her bone replaced what was missing in mine. And that, to me, is just miraculous in itself. And when it came time to leave the hospital, I was terrified. I had such terrible PTSD. I did not want to leave the hospital. I did not want to go back into the world. There was talk at the time that there might have been a third shooter. And I was sure that if there was, he would come find me and finish me off. I didn't ever want to be alone. I couldn't handle loud noises, cars backfiring, doors slamming. So I slept on the floor in my parents' room for 3 months. And I wouldn't even say I hardly slept. It didn't matter how much medication they gave me. I was on such high alert with paranoia that I was not going to sleep until my body would finally give in, and I'd get maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. So the PTSD was severe for at least the first year, and then it, slowly got a little better. I would say it took me 13 years to figure it out, which is such a long time. And I wish as soon as I had the aha moment, which I'll explain in a little bit, I wish I had chosen that sooner. PTSD is so real. It's so overwhelming. It's so paralyzing. And it took a lot of time for me to learn how to work through it, learn how to refocus my thought process in the middle of panic attacks, teach myself how to step back and actually see what's really happening in front of me rather than what my broken mind wanted to see, as a way of protecting myself. That just took so much practice for me. But it was becoming a mom, really, that helped me want to choose better for my life or different for my life. Not that PTSD is something you can just choose to turn off, because it's not. It's so real and so difficult to work through. But when Sandy Hook happened, I had 2 daughters who were the same age as the kids at that school. And I thought I was a baby when I was shot at school, and now actual babies, this was happening to. Babies who were the same age as my babies. And I already had trouble thinking of sending my kids to school. And then when Sandy Hook happened, I completely lost it. That was 13 years after Columbine, I believe, and I regressed 13 years in my emotional healing. I just thought I was never sending my kids to school again. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't let my kids out of the house. And it was actually in that horrible place that I had the aha moment. I kept thinking that I just need to keep my kids home. And I knew that wasn't the right answer because it was just out of fear. And I never wanted my kids to grow up with a childhood that was based on my fears. But I realized every time that my kids go out to school, the same hand that was on me is available to them. And no matter what that is, whether that's at school, whether that's in the car on the way to school, whether that's just at the park, that hand was there in the very worst, most terrifying moment of my life, and yet provided a peace that didn't even make sense. And so much good had come despite the horrible parts of Columbine and the horrible day. And that in that thinking, I realized that the boys, the shooters' intentions were still running my life. They were haunting my nightmares like they threatened. They were, making me think through every single decision with fear, which is exactly what they wanted. And I did not want them to any longer have that control over my life. I wanted to get to pick how what I had been through was going to be used for good in my life and for good in my kids' lives. And from that moment on, not that it's been easy and there are still struggles, but I've decided only good is going to come out of this in my life. And I'm not going to focus on the bad because it's so destructive to my mind and to my spirit.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at what had taken place, whose hand do you think was on your shoulder?
I mean, I think it was an angel. I don't know what else that could be. I did not see the presence of the hand, but I fully felt it. And the shift in power that I felt under that desk when that hand came upon me, and the feeling of knowing it was going to be okay no matter what it was. Even if I was going to die, I felt like that was okay in that moment. I just don't know how that doesn't change a life forever, having a moment like that.
Well, it sounds like that experience also has brought you a lot of peace as a mother, being able to work through everything and send your kids to school and work through that, because that would be difficult for anybody.
Right. I mean, I did. I felt like if I sent my kids to school for several years, this is how I thought of it. I was sending them out to be shot just like I was. And that was such a battle in my broken mind of, no, just because you got shot at school does not mean that your kids are going to be shot at school. But that's not how I saw it. I mean, I just no parent ever wants the struggles they go through for their kids. We all want better for our kids than the difficult things that have happened to us. And it felt so out of my control. And I am a control freak. I like control. It makes me feel safe. So really, I had to shift my perspective because I didn't want my kids growing up with my brokenness put on their childhood.
Yeah, I really have to commend you, Kacey, because that's a lot of just forethought into how you want your kids' development to be, because it would be so easy to go through that experience and then to close the walls around you and just leave them locked,
Totally. I feel like I said, when I had that aha moment and I decided to not be ruled by their anger and their evil intentions and their nightmares anymore, when I decided you don't get to keep being a part of my life that way, these boys weren't even alive. And years and years later, they were still having an impact on my daily life outside of the physical damage that they did to me. And I just feel so free since deciding to let go of that. So it feels like that whole time, those 13 years, I was surviving. And I was surviving well. I mean, I had a nursing career and I got married and I had kids and a family and I was surviving well, but it was still just surviving. And when I let go of all that and I chose a different outcome, I felt so free to the point of I can thrive now. This is what thriving is, when you can let go of the anger and the fear that are chains, really. When you break free of those, it's so freeing. Not that there aren't hard moments. There are. And I'm not sure in my life that PTSD will ever go away completely, but it's much better than it used to be.
Did you ever reconnect with the young boy that helped save you from the school?
Yes, I did. His name is Craig. He actually lost his sister in the shooting. And Craig does, he does a lot of speaking at schools and just really uses his story for the greater good also. We've reconnected numerous times since then.
It just, warms the heart to know that you have this support, of people who have gone through this as well. I know it's a horrific event, but you have supportive people there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's not a lot of people before Columbine who could give us any perspective of what 5 years later it might feel or look like. And so those of us at Columbine definitely share this knowing. You don't even have to talk about it. You just kind of know things that you've seen and heard and smelled and experienced. But part of the reason I share my story is because we didn't have anybody to do that for us. And sadly, this has happened so many more times since Columbine. I saw some statistic last year sometime that Columbine is no longer even in the top 10 of worst school shootings.
Oh my God.
I mean, something like that. That may not be exactly accurate, but that was horrific to me to think Columbine was the most horrific school shooting. And to think that things like that have happened enough times to make Columbine less than what it felt like at the time is just horrible. But these people, so many of us at Columbine use our story now to reach these people, to want to encourage these people to say, yes, you've gone through something horrible and we know what it's like. Nobody could say that to us. I didn't have somebody to talk to and say, I was shot at school. What's it going to be like in 10 years? How did you work through your fear? How did you step back into a school building? How did you send your kids to school? And I don't feel like it's an obligation. I feel like it's an honor to be able to offer my experience to others who are going to experience the same thing so that they don't feel alone, because it can be very isolating to go through. And it's not just a school shooting. It can be cancer. It can be, another tragic accident. It can be so many things that are just so isolating.
Yeah. That really, you get to this point where you have these things happen. It feels like you're the only person it's happening to. And it could be so just overwhelming. But I really applaud you because you are, you've been speaking and going out and speaking. I know that wasn't something that you felt very comfortable doing early on.
No, not at all. At first, the media was we were thrown into this media spotlight that we never wanted. My family and I, and pretty much everybody at Columbine. And as a private family and a really quiet girl, that kind of attention made me very uncomfortable. And I felt obligated to give interviews or to speak at schools. And I would get up and kind of, sob my way through my story for people. But the response I was getting was pity. And that made me so uncomfortable. I would just cry. And it was not why I wanted to share my story. So it wasn't until 2012 when my surgeon asked me to speak at a medical conference to talk about tissue donation, because that's what saved my arm. And I thought, okay, I'll do it because he saved my arm. I owe him one. So I went and I did it. And I didn't like it at all. But the response from people was incredible. They were so encouraged by my vulnerability and by the healing that had come in my life. And I felt like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And right after that presentation, I got 2 or 3 more requests for that fall. And I thought, what? I don't do this. I'm not a speaker. But it really became something that I love. And I think because it brings so much purpose and goodness out of all the struggle. It's making an impact on lives for the better. But I couldn't have given that, in the first 5 to 10 years, because I hadn't gotten to a place in my story where I understood it, or where I appreciated the healing, or where I appreciated that the year before Columbine really prepared me and my family for the trouble of Columbine in a way that helped us get through it easier than we would have without that struggle the year before. And how it's all come together for something so beautiful in my life. it took me a long time to understand that in a way that I could share anything good with other people.
Were you, and this would be understandable if you were, but were you ever at a point where you felt just pure anger for the shooters for this happening?
That's never been the biggest struggle of mine. The most angry I felt is each time I have faced another surgery. And I just had a major operation March 10th of this year, actually, a complete shoulder replacement again. And the amount of pain that I've gone through and this recovery this time has just been really, really difficult. And my kids have watched me suffer through that, and that makes me angry. It makes me angry when there's things that I can't do with my kids that I want to do physically that I'm unable to do with them, or when I have to explain to them what the scars on my arm are from and try to navigate that age appropriately with each of them, and in a way that won't put fear in them, but tells the story in a way that they can grow up and feel courageous and brave and ready to accomplish great things despite the difficult things that are going to come.
Well, I think you're giving your kids such a head start when it comes to deep understanding and love and just learning about how to overcome difficulties. They're going to be so prepared for life, it's not even going to be funny.
Oh my gosh, I hope so. I wrote a blog even about this stuff going on right now in the world. I feel like life brings so many, I call it big realities. I wrote this blog about it. And how do we tell our kids about the big realities of life? Because really, I just want to let them be kids. My kids shouldn't know that you can get shot at school. I just want them to enjoy their innocent childhood where they believe all is good all the time. It's such a beautiful thing, childhood innocence. But that's not life. Like, as much as I want to protect them from these things, even my own story, I can't protect them from forever. I have to tell them. And I want to tell them while they're under my roof, and I get to package it for them in a way that does show them the big realities of life, but from a perspective of great faith and great courage and great knowing that good things can come even when hard things happen.
So
that's the goal.
I think you are accomplishing your goal. I mean, that's a great goal to have. I wish we could all learn these life skills, in a way that would really benefit people and how to move forward in life and really do it in a way that's more loving. Because, I mean, with everything that has happened, and yes, you've had to go through a lot of PTSD and, there's been a lot of surgeries. But what I hear most from your story is just the love and compassion that you have.
I hope so. I mean, that's the other thing we talk to our kids about is, well, I don't know what good it would do me to feel angry with those boys forever and the circumstances of my life. Like, that would be so destructive to my everyday living to choose to stay in that spot. But what can I do with my kids? And we talk about in our house love buckets. That's what we call our hearts, is it's your love bucket. And everybody, are you going to go out and be a bucket filler when you leave this house, or are you emptying buckets? The words that you say to people and the actions you put out towards people is either going to fill their love bucket or it's going to empty it. And, we talk about it in our own house if they fight or they blame each other. So little boy hit big sister. And what did that feel like? Well, it felt terrible. That means your bucket was emptied. Your love bucket was emptied. And how do you fill that bucket? And I feel like our responsibility as parents is to keep their love bucket so full that when they leave the house, that's what's pouring out onto other people. And so that what's pouring out of their bucket, their heart, their words, their actions, is love and kindness. And that when they come home, if they're needing a refill because of whatever life, took from their bucket that day, we are here to fill that bucket back up before they step back out again. And just trying to teach them that your actions have this effect on other people.
That's such a powerful lesson, and I love the love buckets. I'm never going to look at it the same way now, you know.
Hey.
But I love that. I mean, because I mean, how many of us have our love buckets that we go out and we're just, yeah, we're not using them. We're out there doing other things, you know, when we can really be sowing seeds of compassion and love and kindness.
Right. And you know, it comes full circle. When that's what you give to people, that's what they want to give back. It's that golden rule: treat others the way that you want to be treated. And I've been treated pretty awfully by two boys who wanted to take my life, but to continue on with their way of thinking and their path is just destructive to me also. And then that pours out onto everybody else. So I feel like despite hard things, sometimes we can choose better for ourselves.
So how has this impacted you spiritually? You know, how has this been as far as a spiritual component for you just along your journey?
So I was raised in a Christian home. So I would say that I've always known God and had faith. But it was that exact moment that the hand shifted the power under that table that changed my faith forever. It made it so real to me that God is good and that God had purpose in what happened to me and how it was going to be used for him to show love to others through me, through my story. And I feel like that is one moment in my life that I wish I could package with a bow and hand out to people as a present so that they would never have to experience it like I did, to know that God is so good, even in the midst of such horrible evil.
How do you take your faith with you every day? How do you hold that with you and share with other people?
I think learning to become vulnerable and give my story has shown me how much of a connecting point that is with people, and in terms of real, raw relationships and actually doing life together. I'm not much of a pretender. We talk about our kids. 3 of them love the imagination world and 1 of them doesn't. And I don't imagine well. I do real. But I appreciate that about other people, because I think that provides such a deepness and an understanding of what people are going through in life. And being able to establish that with people then opens the door to sharing great faith with each other and great belief that, you know, good things can come from hard things, beauty from ashes.
Oh, what a beautiful just way to look at life and to live. Because when you live that way and you're walking in this type of faith, it really, it's a whole different experience than, you know, going through life just like things are happening to you. I mean, you have a little bit of hope there, you know?
Yeah, and I'm thankful for the people who've been around me to support that in me, because I do feel like there have been so many things in my life where I really could say my life has been hard. Like, it is one thing after another, it has seemed like, and especially through high school. My daughter asked the other day, was high school fun? And I said, oh, honey, I am the wrong parent to be asking. You need to go ask Daddy about that, because no, I can't look back at high school and say high school was fun. High school was horrible for me. But I just feel like the people around me supported me and helped me heal in a way that I can look back and say, no, it wasn't fun. But because I went through all that when I was, 15 to 17, now I have such an appreciation for things in life that some people might not ever have, just not wanting to take things for granted.
Yeah, definitely not taking things for granted. And, thank goodness you also have your spouse there to go ask Daddy that one, So
that's right.
So, but I mean, and I know we're laughing about this, but at some point there needs to be, I would feel like there needs to be like a little bit of humor you can have there. Otherwise, it could be a pretty heavy topic.
For sure. There are definitely things we just choose to laugh about. It's never anything inappropriate, but things like when my arm doesn't work and I reach up for a doorknob because my brain thinks my hand can make it, and then it just doesn't quite make it. So then my arm just looks like it's flailing around trying to grab something, and it never does. There's just little things where you just gotta laugh. Like, if you can't laugh in life, I don't feel like you can really live. We all need laughter and happiness and, the choice and the chance to smile sometimes.
Yeah, I think most of my laughing moments come from myself, so I get it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it can be so defeating to have this body that doesn't work because of somebody else's choice. I mean, that so easily just saying that could make me feel angry. Like, well, he did this to me. I struggle with all this pain because he did this so long ago. And it's not that never crosses my mind, but it's like, well, despite that, I'm going to make it funny. I'm going to have fun with it because what else can I do? The other option is being mad about it, and that feels pointless, like a waste of time.
Well, and you've gone through this experience, and while you're still having to deal with some of the repercussions, in many ways, you're defining yourself. You're not letting that experience define you.
Yeah, that was part of that aha moment, I think, is that so many of my decisions were based on what they did to me. And not just physically, but that emotional, mental scar that they put on me. And I had lived so well overcoming the physical part and finding great life and activity and ability despite having an arm that doesn't work very well. And I wanted to be able to do that with the emotional and mental scars as well. It's not that they aren't there, just like these scars on my body will be there forever. But how can I live an amazing, purposeful, intentional, joyful life despite the scars on my mind and my heart?
Yeah, well, you've done such a beautiful job with that. Despite what has happened, you've really walked through that so well, and you're being such a bright light for so many other people that are going through difficult times, trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to get through this? I feel like I'm the only person that this has happened to,
Yeah. I mean, I hope it's helpful to others. That's the goal in sharing. And I feel like when we share our stories, it's healing to us as well. And that's what I encourage others to do. If it's in a small group, if it's one-on-one with somebody, if it's at a church or a school or just a neighbor that you feel comfortable sharing with, just talking about it and having somebody else know your pain or know your struggle or even just to hear it and listen to it can bring a lot of healing in our own selves as we share and, put our experiences out there.
So you talk about, you went with the doctor to talk about, bone donation. Is that something that's become a great interest to you right now? Is just, when we talk about donorship, I mean, I'm a donor. I know there are a lot of people out there that maybe not really understand what the impact is as far as being a donor.
Yes, that is what started my speaking career, actually, is when I became a recipient of the donation. We had never heard of bone donation before. We'd heard about organ donation from the movies and just news stories. But when they suggested bone donation to my parents, they had just had no clue what that even meant. And it was when I became a mom and I realized that I had 2 arms to wrap around my babies and to hold 2 kids' hands walking the street that I realized what a gift it was to me. And at that first presentation with my surgeon, he had me come back up. There were 1,000 people there. He had me come back up afterwards to answer questions. And I was terrified. And one of the questions that came to me was, did bone donation save your life? And it really made me pause because medically, it didn't save my life. But when you think about what is life and what is really living, it absolutely saved my quality of life. Had I been a 17-year-old amputee, I would be living a much different life. While it still could be great and still wonderful, I feel so much more whole because of the gift of donation and because of that ability to wrap up my babies in 2 arms. So definitely tissue donation is a big passion of mine. It's such a great gift that families and donors give to others, really helping make people whole again, like me.
Well, I think if our listeners just kind of keep in mind, I mean, this happened in 1999. I mean, so bone donation was really progressive at that time. This is not something that you hear a whole lot of, where maybe it's more discussed now.
And that's what we're working toward. My husband works in donation and tissue donation specifically. And that's a big passion of ours as a couple, is to spread that awareness. And things have changed when so long ago, when you became a donor, you had to check different boxes. Like you were maybe an organ donor, but you didn't check the box to be an eye donor or a tissue donor. Where in several states now, when you check the box to be a donor, you're all three. So you are giving so many different gifts to, many different lives.
How important is that? My goodness. Oh my goodness, Kacey. I mean, we could talk forever. I think I have time for one more question here. So when you do speaking, what are some of the topics that people have you come to speak on in particular?
What's so interesting is there's so many that we can touch on. It feels like the story offers many different topics that we can focus on, or one general topic. When I talk to youth groups or churches, a lot of times they want to hear about the teen suicide and choosing life apart from that kind of grief. And everybody wants to hear about Columbine, but with different perspectives, right? Like some moms groups want to know, how do you integrate that into your parenting, into not, raising your children with fear? How do you send your kids to school? And medically, then there's the medical group who wants to hear the medical story and why the work that they're doing is so important, whether that's research or surgical or donation, just how their hard work is changing lives like mine and making lives better. And then there's the faith piece, at churches, just talking about that hand, the ever-present hand that's available to us. And then, of course, the overall just overcoming.
Do you feel that hand on your shoulder today?
I don't physically feel it. I just know that it's there. And I know it's available to me.
I think that's very powerful. It's having that faith where that, that guidance, that, love and protection is there with you all the time.
And just in the very worst moment of my life. And I feel like that's what makes it so powerful, is that in my heart and in my mind is that I was facing the worst kind of evil and the hand showed up and I didn't have to experience it alone under that table.
That is so touching. My goodness, you're going to make me cry. So where can our listeners connect with you, Kacey, and learn about everything that you're doing, your book, and just be part of your community?
Oh, I love the community. I love talking with my readers or people that I speak to. I am on Facebook and Instagram at Kacey Ruegsegger Johnson. And I know that's a really big word, so hopefully you can find the spelling on your website. But also my website, KaceyRuegseggerJohnson.com. And my book, Over My Shoulder, is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Well, Kacey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
I'm really thankful for the invitation. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Kacey. It's been such an honor to have this time with you and to have this candid conversation about your journey through the Columbine shooting, and more importantly, your journey of faith, hope, and resilience as you've built your new life moving forward. So we congratulate you, and I just love this book. Over My Shoulder is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and of course you can pick it up on Kindle too. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Mary Ann. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.